Hello, everyone, and welcome to Political Frenemies. And we are the podcast where a Liberal Democrat and a Conservative, with often very differing views, debate robustly the politics of the week, but still remain friends after. And so I'm Mathew Hulbert. I'm a Lib Dem activist and a former Lib Dem councillor. And then my friend over the way there, if you're watching, is Dr. Chris Newton, academic, defence specialist, and former defence advisor to the Conservatives the last time they were in opposition. How are you doing, Chris?
Hello, yeah, doing very well. Just plodding along like normal. Lot of busy. Just lots of academic type things to do. So, and of course, watching and consuming as much politics as possible. And it's been quite an interesting week, and it's sort of dominated by one issue in particular, hasn't it?
It absolutely has, and it was really the only issue that we could possibly discuss this week. I think we would have been remiss if we'd tried to discuss anything else. We are, of course, talking about immigration and Keir Starmer's speech and all of the reaction to it. If Labour wanted a reaction and 10 Downing Street, they certainly got one. Whether they're happy about it at the end of the week or not, we don't know. But it's certainly been the big thing this week, and all of the major parties have had something to say about it. And what we're going to do this week, and what we're looking to do moving forward in future weeks, is we still intend to have whatever the big political issue of the week has been, but we're going to talk about within that how each of the parties has fared on that topic in that week. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah. So basically, what we've found is that you like it when we discuss each of the main parties, and we've been doing that because it's been the local elections like a couple of weeks ago, and we did the fallout as well last week. We tended to discuss the state of each of the parties, and because that format seems to be very popular, and we did that over Christmas as well, and that episode was pretty popular as well, we're going to keep with that format. So we're going to stick with what works, but we're still going to stick with the shorter podcasts, and we are still going to, for the most part, debate one sort of dominant topic during the course of that week.
Absolutely. So yeah, a few changes, folks, as we told you there would be. And our numbers have really been improving. So obviously, we really thank all those of you that are engaging with us, that are watching, and that are listening. And I'll talk about you doing all the internet-y things as I normally do at the end of the podcast. So, Chris, shall we go for it?
Yeah, let's do this.
So, Chris, then, what was your overall? First of all, did you watch the speech? And I must admit, I've seen various clips of it, but I can't pretend to have watched the whole thing in full. So I will just say that up front. Did you manage to see the whole thing?
I watched bits of it. So in fact, I think I had it on in the background, but I was busy as well, sort of working, because obviously it was on sort of whilst everybody was at work, I think, or it was on in the morning. It was only sort of a few days ago, and I've forgotten already. But I did read the speech as well.
Right, I think they had it. I heard some. There was some comment on this actually. The fact that it was at 8:30 in the morning, which is quite early for such a press conference, and they believed that it was because they wanted it to dominate the day, and it certainly did that. It dominated the day and it dominated the week. But yeah, I gather that was why Number 10 had it so early on that day.
Yeah, and I presume to catch. Obviously to catch the news agenda of the day, maybe to catch people at breakfast, although that would have been a little bit late for that. But it's definitely, it's dominated the news this week, and there has been one or two other issues, but speech. It was not just a speech. Keir Starmer unveiled a whole white paper on immigration, a whole plethora of policies on immigration, different measures regarding especially legal immigration, tightening up the rules on visas and certain criteria of people who are coming into the country. And later on in the week, he did address the illegal crossings as well, the channel crossings, by saying that he would contemplate, or he's exploring return hubs. And he made a little trip to Albania, which didn't turn out quite as he expected, because Albania didn't offer up itself as a return hub. But yeah, it's been dominating the news. There was a YouGov survey, I think, that showed that immigration is now the top issue, or at least the top issue for this week in terms of voters' concerns. So yeah, it's really it's been really setting the agenda, and everyone's been talking about it, and everyone has got an opinion about it. So Mathew, what's your opinion, especially the bit about his speech that was especially got a reaction, whether it was positive or negative, was that he mentioned, and I'll mention the context of this a bit later because I'm sure we'll be debating the context, but the speech included the phrase "island of strangers," which was really controversial and really had a massive reaction. So do you think this is clever politics by Keir Starmer, or is he scoring a bit of an own goal here?
Well, first of all, Chris, and I probably should have done this before we started, I think we should probably set out our personal views on immigration. So just very briefly, let's do that. So as I've said on Talk TV before, and this went down like a lead balloon to that audience, bless them, but I'm very liberal on immigration. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have some process, I would hope a humane process, but some process to deal with people who are absolutely here illegally. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that I think immigration enriches our society. I think we're economically, socially, and culturally better off for the people that choose to make England, the UK, their home. So that is my kind of overriding philosophical position on immigration, Chris. So do you want to quickly tell us what yours is?
Yeah, my position is, of course, immigration can be beneficial, and I'm in favour of immigration in principle. But if you look at the numbers, especially since 1997, and especially over the past actually couple of years as well, where the numbers just have rocketed up. We've gone from, since the 1990s, immigration net migration in the tens of thousands into initially the early sort of hundreds of thousands, and now we're heading up to almost 1 million. And my issue is that, of course, I don't blame people for wanting to make the United Kingdom at home, but immigration has to be immigration policy has to be sensible. It has to come at a rate where the infrastructure can cope with it, and to enable proper assimilation with the immigrants, with the rest of the country. If you do it at an extremely fast and massive rate, at the rate that we've been doing since the 90s, then you have problems in terms of infrastructure under strain, potential cultural problems as well. So yes, immigration, yes, of course, I'm in favor of it, but it has to be sensible, and it has to be managed. It has to be properly managed.
Okay. So that's our view, folks. So I think it's worth just getting that out there before we properly start the discussion. So in terms of Starmer's speech and the bits of it that I saw, I mean, it was hard to think that it was anything other than, and it had probably been planned for quite a long time. These things normally are; they don't tend to just happen. But nevertheless, it did feel like quite a reaction to the local election results and the fact that Labour had done so badly and Reform had done so well. It was hard to see not in that prism. I think, I mean, you know, I don't know how much Keir Starmer would have inputted into this speech, but I'm sure that ultimately he would have had to read it over. I'm sure he would have had to read it over, you know, and give his final approval before then delivering it. So, you know, he obviously must have known that this phrase was in the speech, this island of strangers phrase. And, you know, I've heard lots of commentary on this this week, and I think the consensus seems to be that the people at number 10, well, one of two things, Chris. They either did know of the parallels with the Enoch Powell speech and left it in anyway, or they didn't know and they really should have done. So it either smacks of inexperience, or in that sense, they're very happy that it was said and that it's created all of this controversy, because it, you know, it's certainly got the attention of the media and I suspect the wider public. I suspect there's been lots of conversations had about this and what people think about it up and down the country this week, and I've certainly, you know, heard and been involved in some of them. And so, I mean, you know, I'll be interested in a sec to get your take on whether you think the folks at number 10, you know, knew that this was going to be a controversial line, especially, or whether it kind of hit them as a surprise. In terms of the speech as a whole, and again, from what I've seen of it, I mean, and as I say, I come to this from a perspective that is very pro-immigration and the benefits that it brings. And so, of course, I found a lot to be kind of annoyed and frustrated by from this speech. And I mean, you know, we talk about Labour's week. Was it a good week for them or not? Well, it depends on your perspective. I mean, I suspect they might be quite satisfied in number 10 that their agenda has dominated the week this week, and it certainly has. But you look at some of the polling figures that have come out since the speech, and it doesn't seem to have moved the electorate one jot. Now, you may say that it takes time. And if the government does indeed start delivering from their perspective, not necessarily from my perspective, given my opinion, but from their perspective, if they do indeed start bringing immigration numbers down, then it may well benefit them in the long run politically. I think that's a very big if, by the way. I wonder if we'll see any change at all. And we'll get to Reform UK, but just to say briefly now that it was interesting, one interview I saw that Nigel Farage almost seemed to be suggesting that I mean, this really I thought was ironic, but that Labour were being far too kind of right wing on this, which I thought was really ironic coming from him. But you never know what Nigel Farage his positioning is going to be on some of these things. But Chris, so just on this line then, this Island of Strangers line, and you talk about the context of it, and so you can talk about that. But I mean, do you think the people at number 10 must have known about the echoes of Enoch Powell?
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it's. I mean, I'm not sure. You would have thought that, although you have people like Morgan McSweeney sort of advising that Labour needs to, meet the voters in terms of immigration and this issue, I think you would have still expected Labour people to, if there were sensitivities with Enoch Powell speech, to be alert to that. So I don't, and it seemed to hit them by surprise. That's my impression. So I'm not quite sure whether they thought that one through or tested it out with people, more pro-immigration people within the inner circle or the cabinet and so forth. And that's maybe one of the problems in the sense that Starmer's leadership style seems to be very sort of centralized, and there does seem to be a rather lack of consultation. I mean, Yvette Cooper seems to have not been aware of of the contents of the speech as well when she was doing the interview rounds. So that I suspect it hit them by surprise. But perhaps another reason why it may have hit them by surprise is because if you look at the way in which it was framed and worded, I don't really see an issue with it. I thought what was said was blooming obvious, to be honest. If you look at what he said, Keir Starmer did not say, and this is probably the one and only time I'm going to defend Keir Starmer. Yes, breaking news, everybody. Hell has frozen over. Chris Newton defends Keir Starmer. But if you look at what he said, he was talking about the diverse nation, but he said that a nation, in order for that diverse nation to function, it needs rules, it needs laws, it needs obligations towards one another. And if we don't have any of those things, or if we don't have those things, then we risk becoming an island of strangers. He never said that we were. And lots of people who were kind of absolutely hysterical about this, I think totally misunderstood and misheard the message in the sense he wasn't saying that we're an island of strangers, is that we risk becoming an island of strangers if we don't have a common set of values, common set of rules, a common he didn't go so far as to say a common culture, but certainly a common set of rules. So in my opinion,
but Chris, wasn't the you explained the context of that, and I think you're correct, but wasn't the issue the fact that there was that echo back to, even if it was in a slightly different context by Enoch Powell, there was that echo back to that stranger's word, and it almost didn't matter what the actual context was. There was always going to be a rush to say this is far right rhetoric.
So we're not allowed to use that word ever because it was used in the 1960s. I just don't. I don't really sort of get that. If people feel that, and again, it's a projection. It wasn't a projection. It was a what if kind of thing. I mean, when I heard the speech, I didn't make the connection, to be honest. I just thought that's blooming common sense.
But doesn't it feed? Yeah, sorry, Chris. Doesn't it feed into the idea that some people have, and dare I suggest perhaps that a majority of Reform voters have, that immigrants are somehow the other, are somehow are strangers within our midst, are somehow not to be wholly trusted. Now, obviously, don't agree with that narrative at all, but I'm just suggesting from a certain perspective. Don't you think that phrase being used, and that the whole reason, as I say, it was included in the speech, was to try and make such people want to come back to Labour?
I think what they were trying to do is that they were trying to acknowledge people's concerns, and certainly there is the concern that if we don't have a common set of values, then we risk, then we risk, as I've said, we risk not having much in common. I mean, it's like, for example, the Benjamin Disraeli phrase, two nations. Again, in a, and I've always thought about this in relation to what there is a danger in which Britain could become sort of many nations in the sense that you have groups of people not really sort of relating to each other, and it's not just along racial or ethnic lines, it's along class lines, it's along urban and rural lines. You can make the distinction in various different forms. So in that so in that sense, I think there is an anxiety among people across the spectrum, across not just white British, but I think of other ethnic groups as well, that we do need a common set of values, and if we if we don't have that, if we don't have that common culture, then there is a concern that society could fragment.
But can I ask you, Chris? And I think it's really important that perhaps you explain a bit more on this. I mean, what do you mean by common values? Because I mean, we had this out a little bit on Twitter, as I still call it, this week. Because I said to you that, to me at least, what you were saying sounded a lot like conformity, and as a liberal, we're pretty anti-conformist. So, I mean, what do you mean by common values?
Well, I mean, firstly, at a fundamental level, there has to be, in any society, there has to be an agreement as to what is right and what is wrong. And that's why we have law. And law enforces, enforces conformity based on what the society agrees at that time. So and if you don't have that, then society breaks down, and people do their own thing and have the potential to wrong people. But in the context of how our society develops today, we do have a settled societal view on issues like homosexuality, the role of women, and things, and elements like that, and essentially what the problem is that what happens in a society where you have different groups, and it's not representative of the whole group, but you have different groups that have a completely different attitude in relation to for example the role of women, and women's equality and what they wear, and so forth. What does that do to the society? Likewise, homosexuality, we have a settled view on homosexuality. Again, how is social relations going to progress and move forward if we do have groups that staunchly believe that homosexuality, there shouldn't be gay marriage, and there shouldn't be homosexuality non-stop? And this is borne out in some of the surveys. For example, London, the more diverse London becomes, the more intolerant it becomes. This is a survey in 2018. It's actually one of the least tolerant areas of the UK, I think, towards homosexuality, for example, in comparison with the South, with Scotland, and so forth. So is this? So the question is, you talk about conformity. You want I presume you want people to believe and to adhere to the law about respecting gay rights.
I do.
How can that really happen if you have parts of our society that believe in a very different view of homosexuality?
So, I mean, I obviously do want people to conform to that law, but what I'd just remind you, Chris, again, as I said to you on social media, that it's not really all that long ago. I mean, I suppose it's several decades now, but it's not really all that long ago when the law said that homosexuality was illegal. So I mean, what I'd say to you is, sometimes the law is an ass, and sometimes we have to peacefully protest to change laws, because society's attitudes move on. And laws can seem, and indeed can be, wrong. And so, I mean, I guess what I'd say to you, Chris, is that
but that works the other way as well.
It
And
does.
that's the so you're okay with that?
Well, I mean, I obviously wouldn't be, but what I'm saying to you is that, I mean, normally, Chris, it's the Tories and you on the right who are always saying that we have groupthink now and we need more diversity of thought. It turns out in this argument we're arguing the opposite sides. I'm saying we need to allow diversity of thought, and you're saying that there needs to be conformity. Are you not?
Well, no. I mean, I don't think what I'm arguing is some sort of an overreach. I'm just talking about fundamental values that we hold in a liberal democracy. It's equal women's rights, gay rights, and so forth. I don't think I'm arguing for an overreach in terms of people's sort of thinking here. I'm arguing for even you've got to accept there has to be a point where society says these are the rules. You've got to abide by them. Otherwise, there'll be disorder or there'll be criminality and so forth. And if there is a fundamental disagreement with regards to that, then you have a gradual fragmentation in social order. I'm not necessarily talking about the state overreaching itself and checking everybody's thinking. I'm just talking about laws that have been established. I'm not talking about going beyond the law. I'm just talking about we have this set of values in our democracy which we've agreed upon. Yes, you're right. Things have changed and attitudes have changed, but this is what we've settled on in Britain in 2025. And if we have sections of society that goes against that, then that disrupts the equilibrium in the society. Does it not?
I don't disagree with you wholeheartedly. I think, of course, we have a framework around society, and that is why society, in the main, kind of works, and that we're all able to live our lives relatively peacefully. But I think what I'm arguing, Chris, is that. And I mean, it was interesting that, and I've mentioned this on this podcast before, that when they, after Brexit, when they surveyed the areas that had most voted for Brexit, and especially when those people said in polls that immigration was the main reason that they voted for us to leave the European Union, in the areas where that was most the case, it was where they had least immigration. And there is an irony there, isn't there? Because the people that had least experience of immigration most thought it was a threat. The areas that had experience of immigration broadly found it a positive one. And I just worry that whatever the context, I just worry that, especially given and I guess you can't blame Keir Starmer for how the media reacts to his speech necessarily, but I think especially given some of the reaction to his comments, and especially that line about Island of Strangers, that it just feeds into the narrative that a sizable proportion of the British electorate feel about immigration that, as I said earlier, they're somehow other, they're somehow strangers, they're somehow not quite like us, and that is a bad thing, rather than, as I would see it, that actually it adds to the diversity of our nation and makes us economically, socially, and culturally richer. So I guess that's the argument that I'm making.
Firstly, I mean, you don't, in relation to people's experiences, people may have moved, people may have in those areas, they may have been thinking about experiences in the previous areas in which they lived in, but and people, and there is, and I think. I think this is also a commentary about society in general as well. I mean, the basic sort of critique of sort of neoliberalism from the left is that society has become atomized, and society has become less neighbourly. Now, there are some areas of the country that's probably more neighbourly than others, and I think that this potentially reflects one element of that, where you do have elements that don't integrate with each other, whether the fault lies on one side or the other side, or whatever. I'm not here to talk about, but there are sections that perhaps don't integrate as much as perhaps people would like.
But Chris, this is just where I really am missing something, because I mean, I guess my view is that as long as people, are living their lives peacefully, whether they interact with others, of course, it'd be nice if they can. It'd be lived in a society where we're all, speaking to each other and great, that would be wonderful. But I think, what's the problem? As long as people are living their lives peacefully, what's the issue? I don't understand.
No, I think people want to want to feel part of a community, want to feel part of.
So you want conformity? That is what you want. You're arguing for conformity.
Well, wanting to be part of a community, that's not necessarily conformity. It's just people sort of mixing and relating to each other. The other thing I would say is that, whether you think this is a good thing or not, this is how I think people feel, is that you have people in society that are very comfortable with rapid change in a society, and you have people in the society which aren't comfortable about rapid change and want things to stay as they are.
But things are not going to stay the same, are they? Things are just not going to stay the same. We live in, without wanting to sound very much like Tony Blair, we live in a rapidly changing and ever changing world, and I know that's scary. It's scary for all of us, I think. But and again, without wanting to sound too much like Mr. Blair, I think he was right when he said, I think it might have been in his last speech as Labour leader to the party conference, that it's for government to lead, it's for government to explain to people, and to bring them along with these rapid changes, rather than to try and claim, as I think UKIP once did and Reform does now, it's okay, it's all right, people that are scared, because we can take you back to some jolly day that never really existed. We can take you back to some 1950s it'll all be okay, don't worry, just vote for us. That is a load of bunkum. We are not going to go back to a past time where everything was supposedly rosy, even though of course it wasn't. The world is changing, it's going to continue to change, and what government should do, and I don't think this government does do it, and I think that's part of the reason why it's in the mess it is electorally, is to bring people along, to say, we can't stop the change. It's not within our power to do that. These are global forces. But what we can do is explain the change, explain how we're going to try and help bring you along with that, and hopefully we'll all progress along together. But these parties that try and promise a return back to some idyllic day that never really existed are really, in my view, doing the electorate a great disservice.
Well, the thing is that the establishment hasn't brought people along, and
Right.
and the fact, and if you tell people you've got to take the medicine, or there's nothing we can do about rapid change, or even worse, we're going to stem the flow of change, but at the same time accelerate it and go back on completely what you're saying, then don't be surprised when there's an electoral backlash. Now, in everything that I've said, I'm not saying that this is necessarily right or wrong. I'm trying to explain why we're having these electoral backlashes. Brexit, but now we've got Reform UK, and I think that one of the reasons is that people who are for change in our society, for rapid change in our society, they've largely had it all their way for decades. And the only thing that the people who want to stem the tide of change have had over the past few decades is Brexit, and that hasn't been properly implemented as well. So the thing is, in order to, and this go back to Starmer's speech, in order to have a society where the people who want change, where there's compromise between the people who want change and the people who want who want to at least slow down the pace of change. In order to do that, there has to be some kind of meeting there and some compromise halfway. And throughout the last decade, especially since the 1990s, I have not seen the side of change really make any effort compromising with the side that don't want major change.
So, Chris, let's wrap up on Labour, because we've only got about 10 minutes left and we need to do the other parties. Obviously, Labour was going to dominate this week. Almost in one word, do you think that Number 10 will think that this has been a good week for them?
Yes, they'll think that. But if I can say one thing about this is that they'll probably think that. But the other thing to think about is the fact that Starmer's making all of these noises, and it's the complete opposite to what he's said when he was leader of the opposition and beforehand. And this is, again, the duplicitous nature of it, and it will undermine trust in politics.
And on that, I entirely agree. And I do think, Chris, one week we do need to do a thing which talks about Keir Starmer and I appreciate there's no one from Labour here, so they would no doubt say different, but where we do reflect on the many different positions that Keir Starmer has taken on almost everything during his political career. Shall we move to Reform UK, who it's been obviously a very interesting week for them, given their raison d'etre is a lot on immigration, and obviously has been part of the reason why they did so well, regretfully from my perspective, but why they did so well at the recent local elections. But it was interesting that Farage almost seemed to suggest, at least in one interview this week, that number one, he said that he couldn't believe Starmer on this, and he was bound to say that. But he almost suggested that Labour had perhaps kind of gone too far in its rhetoric. It's an interesting, I guess, rather like Donald Trump. Farage doesn't necessarily always come out with what you'd expect him to come out with. He's quite iconoclastic in that respect. He'll say what he thinks. But I guess it's interesting because actually, although a lot of Reform voters, I'm sure, are, to put it at its politest, very sceptical on immigration, Keir Starmer also needs to appeal to a new working class base that he wants to steal from Labour, and I think he probably recognises that those people, for example, will often use the NHS and may well have had very positive experiences of being treated by people who have made Britain their home from other countries. And so his position is actually perhaps, not that I want to give Nigel Farage credit, but his position is probably a little bit more nuanced than some might expect it to be. Do you think?
So, I mean, like I say, I think in terms of Reform UK supporters, I don't think the vast majority of them are anti-immigration per se. Like I say, the issue is scale. And I mentioned at the beginning that the scale has completely gone out of control, and that's the issue. And this is perhaps Starmer's problem with the language and so forth, is that he doesn't actually really understand these voters and what they're asking for and what they're demanding. It's not that they don't like immigrants. It's like, well, as I've said, the pace of change is out of control, and it needs to be brought under control. So in that sense, Starmer's, perhaps he's very careless in his language, is because he doesn't really understand kind of the voters and understand the fact that whilst there is concern, whilst there is unease with aspects of immigration, ultimately Reform UK voters understand the benefits of immigration. It's just a case of pace and scale. But the say
yeah. So sorry, I was just going to ask Chris. So from the Reform UK perspective, how do they benefit from this? Do they benefit from this then that their voters and their prospective voters will just dismiss what Starmer has had to say? I mean, do you think there is any threat to Reform UK from Labour really focusing, as it has this week, not just with the speech, but with all the tweets that Starmer or his team on his behalf have put out under his name? He's done so many tweets this week, really talking about the immigration issue. I mean, do you think this poses any threat to Reform UK, or do you think that actually he's just not believed or believable on this issue, Keir Starmer?
The only threat is if they actually deliver real change,
right?
And under the proposals, I think they're going to, their aim is to actually bring down immigration by 100,000 or maybe a couple 100,000, which is nowhere near the tens of thousands figure of the 1990s. So I can't see them delivering. And as you said, there is widespread skepticism whether Starmer actually believes this. I don't think he does believe anything he said this week. And therefore, I think people, especially people inclined to vote Reform UK, Labour's just like the Tories on immigration. We need to vote for a party that's actually been consistent on immigration from day one, and that's Reform UK. So at the moment, I don't see the threat, and that's reflected in the polling, and unless Labour seriously delivers, and they've got every incentive to deliver, but I don't know if their heart's in it really, especially in relation to the boat crossings as well. No, I don't think this. Labour's trying, but I don't see this at the moment being a threat to reform.
So let's move on to the Tories then, and their week in regards to this issue. And isn't it interesting, Chris, that already that they've come third in our rankings, and it just seems sensible, obviously, to talk about the government first, and then to talk about Reform UK, given how much this issue dominates and will have won them votes at the recent local elections. I mean, you're our resident Conservative, Chris. I mean, have the Tories said much on this week? If they have, is anybody listening, or are they still basically whistling in the wind?
I'm our resident Conservative with a small c. But some might say I'm something else with a small c, but let's not go. But I mean, it's interesting. We covered the Tories last week, and I completely forgot that they published a draft bill. That's how much impact that they're making on immigration. That's how much impact they're making. I completely forgot that they published this bill. This obviously is not a proper bill because they can't implement it. But this is the problem. Kemi Badenoch didn't go on immigration this week. She went on sort of the economy and unemployment and so forth. And I can understand why she did that, because every time, this is the Tories' problem. Immigration is the number one issue, is going to be one of the most important issues throughout this parliament. And yet the Tories can't make any political capital out of it because of its atrocious record over the past 14 years. And this is the problem that Badenoch will come up against time and time again, is the fact that they still can't really get over their record. And every time they talk about they talk about things, or they talk about immigration, then people will say, well, why didn't you do that when you were in government? So yes, this is extremely difficult for the Tories. But
also as well, Chris, that and again, I'm not originally saying this. I heard a discussion on the radio, I think it was earlier, making this point that actually the Tories have been saying two different things this week. So Kemi Badenoch has been saying that the Tories need to apologise for much of its record on this issue. But Shadow Home Secretary Chris Bilp has basically been kind of lauding the Tory record. So again, within Shadow Cabinet, they need to decide what the line is.
Yeah, and that again, that's down to party management, and that line should have been worked out. Plus, you have the more liberal wing of the Conservatives still, taking the Lib Dem position on immigration, even though I think it's not, I would say it's not conservative to have the pace of change that we're having. It's a liberal position. It's philosophically liberal. It's not. I wouldn't say it's conservative. So there's still lots of problems that the Conservatives need to sort out in relation to their position on immigration. And Badenoch, still hasn't. Well, she's outlined some policies, but there's party management issues there that has to be sorted out. Just very quickly, I've got to ask you about this: is the Lib Dems' response here, and whether the Lib Dems, whether there's Starmer's vacated that pro-immigration space, so will the Lib Dems really benefit from what Starmer's doing this week?
I think, it sounds terrible when you're discussing issues that affect real people's lives when you just see it through a political prism, but that's kind of what we're here for. I think it's great for the Lib Dems, and should mention the Greens as well. I think it's good for them too. And I would certainly hope, I can only speak about the Lib Dems really, but I certainly hope that we would be strong on being pro-immigration. That yes, of course, we're bound to say that where people are here illegally, that needs to be dealt with. But that we should absolutely recognise the positives of immigration. I was pleased to hear Ina Davies' PMQ this week on this issue. Again, talking about care, Chris, I know you think that he talks about care every week, and he does pretty seem to, but that's because it's such a big issue for us and for him. And he's literally written the book on caring, which you can get soon, folks, on good bookshelves everywhere. I think he was right to say that we should absolutely praise those people who come to care for others who come from other countries to do that. And I think he's absolutely right to do that. And so I think for us and the Greens, it does open up. And I've seen a lot of people. I've seen people leave the Labour Party this week. I've seen elected representatives, on some councils take themselves out of the whip because they were disgusted by Keir Starmer's speech. And so, again, it may well be that actually in number 10, they kind of cheer that because they think that we're differentiating ourselves from the kind of the left of our party, and we're a kind of centrist government, and we're focused on the people's priorities and all this stuff that they come out with. But I do think it opens up space for the Lib Dems and the Greens to make that pro-immigration case, and so I certainly hope that's what we'll be doing, Chris.
Do you not think that actually Labour's reading the room here and trying to meet the voters, trying to meet the kind of the consensus, the majority opinion on controlled immigration, is there not a feeling that maybe this, if the Liberal Democrats want to capture the centrist vote as opposed to the leftist vote, then maybe they should move more towards the centre on immigration?
Well, I'd still like to think, and who knows whether I'm right on this, perhaps I'm not, but my view is that actually there's still a decent, if not majority, then a sizable section of the British electorate that thinks we should be a warm and welcoming and kind and tolerant and decent nation that welcomes those, especially those who are claiming asylum and who are fleeing war or persecution, that we should absolutely be welcoming these people. And my view, even in terms of illegal immigration, and I'm not saying it's not an issue, and I'm not saying there doesn't need to be processes to deal with it, although again I think they should always be humane, because I don't like some of the language that's talked about with this of illegal aliens and all of that. I don't like that. These are human beings, whatever the way they tried to get over here, and that they should always be treated humanely. So I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any, I'm not saying let everyone come regardless of the situation. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I think we should generally be a welcoming country, and that we should have humane processes where people have arrived here that shouldn't be here to deal with those, and we should be dealing with the gangs that bring people over on boats and all of that.
Just one, because I know we're pretty much out of time. Just one very quick question: is there not concern here about? Yes, the principle of immigration, how much it benefits society and so forth, but there are other human elements here, in terms of and this involves both immigrants and especially working class population, in relation to how is people getting decent housing, the impact that immigration has on, particularly, I say low skilled, I don't like the phrase, but you know what I mean by that, by the fact that it depresses kind of low wages and so forth, the real conditions that some of these people traveling on the boats, working in the black economy, are suffering under as well. There has to be some kind of concern. Yes, we want to be compassionate, but is that compassion, actually leading to a lower quality of life among both immigrants and especially working class people alike?
But you see, what I'd say on that is that I don't think most, if not all, of those things are the fault of the immigrant. I think those things are the fault of government policy, and I think it's very easy to blame, the people down the road who some people might think aren't quite like them or who are different, rather than actually focusing their ire on the government of the day. And because this government could be choosing to, and I know that you necessarily wouldn't want them to do this, Chris, but they could be choosing, for example, to tax the richest a bit more to pay for better public services.
I'm not. Sorry, just very, very quickly. I just want to very quickly come back on that. I'm not saying it's the fault of the immigrant. It's the consequence of the numbers that are coming in, and the fact that it's just not humanly possible to build the infrastructure to accommodate the numbers that are coming in. I don't blame individual immigrants for wanting to make a better life in the UK. I'm very sympathetic to them on a human level, but it's a consequence of this process of volume and the sheer impossibility of building the infrastructure to accommodate so many people at once.
Well, I think what we've shown here, Chris, is that this is a really big issue. It's going to absolutely remain a really big issue in the several years ahead, in the run up to the next general election, probably in 2029, especially with reform being so prominent. And so, no doubt this will be the first of many times that we debate this subject over the months and the years. That got quite feisty there, Chris, at times. But as we always say on this show, the very point of this show is that we can debate robustly, and me and Chris always do, both kind of offline and online and on air, but we genuinely are good friends too. And in actual fact, on the day that we're recording this on Friday, we'll be seeing each other in person tomorrow. So really looking forward to a catch up in person. So, folks, thanks very much for being with us. We really appreciate it, whether you're watching on YouTube or your smart TV, or whether you're listening via one of the many podcast platforms that we're on. Please do all the internety things. Please do like, please subscribe, please follow us on Twitter at @poll_frenemies. Tell us if you like the changes that we're enacting. I guess if you don't, tell us too, because we've got to be open to criticism as well as praise.
And also, I'd like to know if who's watching us on YouTube at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning is either very dedicated people in the UK or people from all over the world. And if you are watching us from different countries, do tell us in the comment section, where you're from. We'd love to know what our
Why
reach
would
is.
they not want? Why would they not want to be watching us two at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? I mean, if anything is going to send them off to sleep, it's us.
True. Yeah.
Folks, thanks very much for being with us. Chris, as I'm recording this, I'll see you tomorrow. So looking forward to that. And folks, we'll see you next time here on Political Frenemies. So from Chris, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.
And from me, it's goodbye.